Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the 47th Forum on Tolerance, Opportunity and Marginalization in the U.S. Military, a conversation about empowerment and disenfranchisement. I'm the chair of the Forum on Tolerance Committee, Lori Carlson. Before we get started tonight, though, I just wanted to thank some of the parts of the college that helped make this event happen. This event is generously funded by the Sheldon and Fran Brown Forum on Tolerance Endowed Fund, as well as the RAP Experience at NSCC, which stands for Rise, Achieve, Persist. So thank you to the RAP Experience and the exceptional Michelle Cubelli Harris. And also thank you to Academic Affairs at North Shore Community College and our amazing interim VP of Academic Affairs, Andrew DeFusco Sullivan in particular. I also wanted to thank the current Forum on Tolerance Committee members, which include Dr. Lisa Altamari, Professor Yusuf Hayes, Dr. Carl Jean, Amanda Doolin, Michelle Cubelli Harris, Jennifer Chavez, Dr. Robert LeBlanc, Professor Wanda Pothier-Hill, Michael Sullivan, Dr. Sheldon Brown, Dr. Kara Kaufman, Ty Tran, and Fanny Kai. So thank you all for your hard work. And so now I'm excited to introduce our moderator for this event, who will do the honors of introducing Bob Delaney, our speaker for tonight. Fanny Kai is an alumna of North Shore Community College in 2018 and Tufts University 2021, majoring in clinical psychology. Fanny is working in research and education in the field of refugee trauma, and she and Bob are colleagues from the Harvard program in Refugee Trauma, Global Mental Health Trauma and Recovery Training Program. Fanny brings great energy, creativity, attention to detail, and empathy to the Forum on Tolerance Committee, and we are grateful to have her as a member. So thank you, Fanny.
Thank you so much for that, Lori. Hello, everyone. My name is Fanny. I'm an NSCC alumna, class of 2018. I want to start by saying thank you to North Shore Community College and the Forum on Tolerance Committee for this opportunity to be here with everyone. I'm delighted to be introducing today's speaker, Bob Delaney. So today we're going to hear about the intersections of Bob's many lived experiences and see how those experiences translated into expertise and knowledge that he uses to empower others. Bob Delaney's life has been told in his two books, Covert, My Life Infiltrating the Mob, and Surviving the Shadows, A Journey of Hope into Post-Traumatic Stress, also called PTS, as well as on HBO Real Sports, ABC Sports, ESPN, CNN, and numerous other TV, radio, and press media outlets. Bob was born in New Jersey to a state police family. Following in his father's footsteps as a state trooper, early in Bob's career, he was involved in a landmark undercover operation called Project Alpha, masquerading under his given identity, Bobby Covert. His time undercover from 1975 to 77 led to the successful conviction of more than 30 Mafia criminals. In the aftermath, he struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, and his ensuing journey and therapy helped him come to terms with all that he had endured while he was undercover. After retiring from the police force, Bob turned to his love of basketball. Donning the uniform number 26, Bob Delaney was a fierce professional basketball referee on the court for 24 seasons in the NBA, refereeing games starring fellow legends like Shaq, Barkley, Kobe, and Jordan. He has been a passionate leader for more than 3 decades in the demanding field of professional sports. His accomplished career is as one of the NBA's highest rated crew chiefs and founder of 2 schools that train officials for high integrity roles within the NBA, the WNBA, and college basketball. In 2003, Bob was the recipient of the Gold Whistle Award, the highest honor in sports officiating. Furthermore, Bob is a PTS operational stress authority and advocate. He brought his learned skills to spread PTS awareness and support to military service members and their families. And he's been recognized with honors from many, including senior ranking military leaders. Notably, in 2010, President Barack Obama conferred upon Bob the President's Volunteer Service Award for his ongoing work with US and NATO military members. In 2017, he was recognized by the Tragedy Assistance Programs for Survivors with the National Community Partnership Award for his work with military Gold Star families. Additionally, he has been awarded twice the U.S. Army Outstanding Civilian Service Medal for his visits with troops in Iraq, Afghanistan, Europe, Asia, Canada, and U.S. bases, sharing his PTS education and awareness message, underlining that not all wounds bleed. To this day, he continues to present globally on leadership, trauma, post-traumatic stress management, and self-care. And he just finished authoring his latest book entitled Heroes Are Human, Lessons in Resilience, Courage, and Wisdom from the COVID Frontlines, out this fall of 2020. And I will close with this quote from Bill Walton, NBA Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Famer. He spoke of Bob, his past lives in law enforcement, media, education, and the business of sport, conflict resolution, and service to those in need define his character. To me, Bob is an exceptional mentor, role model, colleague, and friend, and I'm beyond honored and grateful to be introducing Bob Delaney. Please join me in giving Bob a big welcome.
Thank you, and I can hear the applause coming, and for some of you, it's the first time you've ever applauded for a referee, so I appreciate that. And what a beautiful introduction. I was really tempted to try and get my kids in. So we may have to play that back. I'd love for them to hear some of that stuff. It's an honor to be with you all, and I look forward to spending some time and sharing some thoughts on leadership, resiliency, self-care, trauma. Those are areas that I have presentations about around the world, as Fanny said. Fanny, if we could put the PowerPoint up, that'd be great. And so it's the North Shore Community College. I thank each and every one of you for inviting me and allowing me to share some thoughts and time with you. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that there's 3 photographs that are there. And you see the buckets of conversation that I'm offering: leadership, resiliency, self-care, trauma. Obviously, the middle photograph is during my MBA days, and then the presentations that I do is on the right side. But if you look at the left side, that is a photograph up in Erbil. And you'll see a darker uniform with a red kind of cap. That's the Peshmerga forces, the Iraqi forces that were fighting with, and if you look over my shoulder, you see a tall gentleman wearing a lighter camouflage uniform, and that's General Bob Brown. He was a 1-star general at the time, retired a 4-star as the commander of the Pacific. And the amount of time that I got to spend in Iraq and Afghanistan gave me a stronger understanding as to what our military members experience. And, you know, as I said, I get to speak globally. And when I think back on my education and I think back on what I learned, one of the things that never computed in my head were formulas, X plus Y equals Z. That just doesn't compute in my head. But if we take this formula, if we go to the next slide, if you take this formula, experience plus intellectual readiness plus reflection equals development. It's a formula that I think works, and I start every presentation sharing this formula. And experiences are what? If we break it down, experiences, you have them, I have them. At times, we get the test before we even know what the material is. We learn through hard knocks. Experiential learning is a big part of who we are. It comes to us on a daily basis. And then there's intellectual readiness. Intellectual readiness is the actual studying of a subject. It's the actual studying that we are given. We're given elementary school, we're given high school, and then we make decisions afterwards. Are we going to further our education? And I was very fortunate. The first leaders I ever had in my life sat across the dining room table. I was truly raised by a village with my grandparents, aunts and uncles, my parents, family members, coaches, teachers, all having an influence on my life. And the easiest way to describe it is at 56 years of age, when it came to intellectual readiness, I went back to school to get my master's in leadership from St. Mary's College in California because I wanted to understand about leadership from the academic side. I had learned it on the experiential side. I saw leadership when I played ball at the high school and college level. I saw leadership when I entered the New Jersey State Police. I saw leadership when I went undercover, infiltrating the mob. You can learn from negative as well as positive. And then I saw leadership during my years with the NBA in an administrative and management position. And I offer to folks that the first two parts of the formula, I think, are kind of easy. They come to us. The hard part's the reflection. That's the difficult part. You can imagine you're sitting on your desk and you get your feet up on a desk, you're looking out the window and your boss walks by and says, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm reflecting, ma'am." That's not going to go over big. We're doers in our society. We're doers in life. And action is what we're after. Yet, I do know, in order for development and growth to take place, we need the third part coupled with the first two. And so my hope after tonight, before you put your head on a pillow, or maybe over the next couple of days, that you think about some of the things and reflect about some of the things that we speak about during the time that we're together. And so if we go to the next slide, I'm going to share an experience with you. As Fanny said, I followed in my father's footsteps and joined the New Jersey State Police, and that outfit is steeped in deep military tradition. It was founded by Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf, the father of the famed General H. Norman Schwarzkopf of the Gulf Wars. And he brought down from West Point that kind of military-style training that exists till this day. And next week, I'll be at the State Police Academy at Seagirt, New Jersey, speaking to the recruits on the same subject that I'm sharing with you. And I went through that academy, 23 weeks, resident training, graduate, and it was a heck of a gig back then because we lived at the stations. We were the local police for towns that didn't have their own police department, as well as doing the miles and smiles on the highway, handling tickets or accidents. And every police station was the same. You walk in, it was a police station. The second and third floor were where the troopers lived, 2 troopers every room, and downstairs was a family room, ping pong table, kitchen. And it was a house. It was where we lived. My first 6 months, I was stationed in Flemington. Then I went to Newton. And every 6 months for the first year and a half on the job, you were transferred. And my third station was at Somerville Station. And, you know, after a year on a job, you start to think you're cocky and you kind of got this thing down. And I walked in after 2 days off and into the squad room. And for those who've never been in a squad rooms, they try to make you feel good about yourself. They have these little cubby holes with your name on it, as if that's your office. And there was a note on mine to call Lieutenant Jack Liddy, Division Headquarters, Criminal Investigation Section, Organized Crime Bureau. This guy had more titles next to his name than I ever saw. Folks, I grew up Irish Catholic. That means I wake up guilty in the morning. I thought I did something wrong. I thought I had a problem on my hands. And the other trooper said, "Relax, kid, give the guy a call. He probably gave you a ticket to a mob guy. He works organized crime." I did. And the lieutenant said to me, "You're going to be in for a while?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I'll meet you in the kitchen about an hour and a half." Hour and a half later, I walk into the kitchen area of the station, and there stands an intimidating figure. Lieutenant Liddy stands about 6'3", kind of guy that hangs on his lapels when he speaks to you. And also the kind of guy that the button on the shirt has never met the hole in the shirt. He should be wearing a 19, but he's still wearing that 16 and a half size neck. And after a period of conversation, he said to me, "Are you interested in doing undercover work?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, and then he turned to walk away. And I said, "Lieutenant, what is it? Drugs, narcotics?" Because back then, all we're doing is buy bust on the street. He said, "If you keep asking questions, you're going to be out of running." Over the next 3 weeks, I learned that the President's Organized Crime Task Force out of Washington, D.C., the FBI, and New Jersey State Police were joining forces. We were going to start our own trucking company on the waterfront in New Jersey. I became one of those undercover guys. And while I'm not here to talk to you about undercover work, I need to share with you what my experience was that created the traumatic experiences and traumatic stresses that I experienced. So the first trucking company we started was called Mid-Atlantic Airspace Transportation. And Mid-Atlantic was a small trucking company, and we made like we were 5 co-owners. There were 2 state troopers and 3 FBI agents. And we acted as if we were all co-owners in this. And it was a small operation, and the grant was written for 6 months. Every federal grant is written for 6 months, like we were going to end organized crime in the state of New Jersey and then move on to the next thing. And we learned very quickly that wasn't going to happen, but we got lucky in the investigation. A guy by the name of Pat Kelly, who was the consigliere for the DiNorgio crew of the Bruno crime family, was jammed up. State police had cases on him. FBI had cases on him. He could either go to jail or come to work for us. He chose to work for us. And he was the first one that really schooled us in a way of a wise guy. He said, you know, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I never saw a bus going down the street with 5 bus drivers. Somebody's got to be in charge. And he gave us an understanding of how to have a plan to go about this. And we opened a new trucking company called Alamo Transportation in the shadows of the Statue of Liberty, Liberty State Park in Jersey City, New Jersey. I became the president of that company. The informant, Pat Kelly, became the vice president. The other trooper became my driver bodyguard. And the FBI agent took on roles of truck managers, truck operations, truck sales. And at one point, we had 20 trucks hauling for us around the United States. And we had 2 new partners, the Genovese and Bruno crime families. And we were kicking back 25%, 12.5% to each. I can go on for hours talking about that Soprano-esque type of life that I led. And the story is told in a book called Covert, My Years Infiltrating the Mob. I had a catchy name for an undercover guy. My name was Bobby Covert. We weren't trying to be cute or funny. I took on the identity of a child that died at birth. The birth records and death records are not cross-indexed in our country. So if you go to the death record side, you find someone that died at birth, Robert Allen Covert. His mom was Carol Stevens. His father was Elmer Covert. He was born in November of 1949. I was born in November of 1951. Same first name, same ethnic sounding last name. You're able then to start developing your persona. And if ever checked, that birth certificate will show up. And so this whole lifestyle that I became immersed in, this subculture, and then with the arrests, and if you will allow me, I'm going to fast forward to the last day. What I thought was going to be the greatest day of my life ended up being one of the worst. We mustered up at 4 a.m, and I was made to look as though I was thrown out of the state police when I went undercover. And now all of a sudden I'm resurrected. Troopers are looking at me with jaundiced eye because they thought I had gone bad. The FBI agents are there, and they start going out early morning hours, 4 o'clock in the morning, and picking up the defendants and bringing them in. And Sergeant Barry Lardier was assigned to be with me. And Sergeant Lardier was in plain clothes, but he had a state police ID on the outside of his pocket, his jacket pocket. I had nothing on me that said, when you work deep cover, there's nothing on you that says that you're state police or who your real name is. And he said to me at one point, you want to go downstairs and see what's going on, meaning where the fingerprinting, the processing, photographs, shooting them off into the room to see who's going to be the next informant was taking place. I said yes when I meant no. I put myself at military parade rest, where you put your hands behind your back, head up, shoulders back. As I'm standing next to Sergeant Lardier, a guy that I had hung out with, stole tractor trailers with, did gun deals with, did dope deals with, was being fingerprinted. The trooper was putting the handcuffs back on him. A guy by the name of Ronnie Sardella. And Ronnie looked at me and said, Bobby, what they pinch you for? And before I could answer, Sergeant Lardier said, he's not pinched. He's with us. He's a trooper. The look that went between us was not one of anger. It was one of hurt and disappointment. He looked at me and he said, Bobby, how can you do that to us? How can you do it to me? I'm your friend. Freeze frame, go back to St. Mary's Grammar School, Patterson, New Jersey. I was taught by the Good Sisters of St. Dominic. I got caught doing something wrong in 3rd grade, and Sister Joseph Rosier told me I was going to be punished. And before she told me what the punishment was, I said, Sister, Jimmy DeLello is doing it too. I gave up my best friend in a heartbeat. You know the ring that says the good sisters are married to God? That's also there to put welts on your head. She cracked me. She gave me a shot in the head and she said, Delaney, you don't tell on your friends. It's an unwritten rule in a schoolyard. You don't tell on your friends. Yet what we ask undercover people to do is become friends with people and tell them. Those kinds of emotional feelings inside of me, the hypocritical feelings, I used to refer to it as an emotional roller coaster. It was like emotional violence inside of me. The state police and FBI, a few days after the raid, came up with intelligence information and wiretap of innuendo of physical threats, death threats to me. And so I had troopers that were assigned to live with me and be around me at all times. And it's a very invasive kind of lifestyle. And this group, and I still had to go out and identify people. I had to do surveillances. I had to go testify in grand juries. And for something I wanted to get away from so bad, I started putting the leather coat on again. I got the pinky ring going and I had the chains around my neck going in to testify at grand juries. And the prosecutors are saying, you can't get up on a stand. You look more like them than them. And my whole demeanor was going back into being something that I was not, because that had become my new normal. Being Bobby Covert, who I was for 3 years, and going back to becoming Bob Delaney was a struggle. And while to the rest of the world, I was being told that I was a tough guy and I was being given this title of heroic work and being given all kinds of awards, and I was testifying before Congress and having Senate hearings, and being in Washington, and people wanted to talk about, not what I talk about today, about the undercover work, about the operational side of it. And I felt like a hypocrite. There was a level of, it felt like, yeah, they're telling you you're a tough guy, but they didn't see me at 2 o'clock in the morning with my gun out, going around my house, pushing shower curtains back because I was afraid they were coming to get me. And so over the years, I would start talking a little bit more to detectives that were working undercover about this. And then my bosses heard about the work that I was doing with the emotional, psychological aspects of law enforcement. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I started speaking, and they asked me to speak to the uniform troopers. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time in uniform, but I had to come up with something that made sense, that brought us together. And unfortunately, every trooper will have their first fatal accident. So I shared mine. And what I told them in that room that day was that it was Route 202 with 2 kids on a motorcycle, and I don't have to go into the grisly details. But I had never seen death in its truest form. And they can train you all they want at the academy for homicides or fatal accidents or death, but until you see it yourself, do you truly understand it? And there's not much to do at the fatal accident once it's deemed to be fatal, because in the state police in New Jersey, there are fatal accident experts that are called out. So we hold the scene down, and you flare it out and you direct traffic. And the senior man that I was with, Gary Rinker, had been down this road many times. Took out a cigar, started smoking. I led a deadly do-right kind of life as a kid. I only had a month on the job at this time at 21 years of age. And I had never smoked. But my biggest concern that Gary was going to see me shaking underneath my uniform. And so in trying to act cool, an ambulance worker was walking by, smoking a cigarette, and I could figure I could smoke one of those, or at least hold on to it and look like I knew what I was doing here. And I said, hey, pal, I'll take one of those, except that this guy was smoking Camel Unfiltered, and I took a hit on that, and I thought I was going to pass out. When we got back to the state police station, I went in the bathroom, I got into a stall, and I cried my eyes out, sobbing quietly in hopes that no other trooper would hear me, because they would think I was weak. They would think I couldn't do this job. They wouldn't want to go on patrol with me. That was all my inner voice. And yet, when I did share that story in front of a room full of troopers, over half of them came up to me during a break and said, I've gone through something similar. What is personal is universal. And this drove me for an understanding of what trauma and what traumatic experiences do to all of us. And this subject has been around forever. You know, after the Civil War, it was referred to as soldier's heart. After World War I, it was shell shock. World War II was battle fatigue. After the Korean and Vietnam Wars, it was referred to as flashbacks. Today, we refer to it as post-traumatic stress disorder. In 1980, it became post-traumatic stress disorder. But I really believe that we've over-medicalized this conversation. We scare people away from it. And please don't interpret that I'm saying we don't need the medical side of the house. We do. We have tremendous resources. Yet we have to figure out a way to build bridges, strong bridges, from those that need the resources to those that are providing it. And that bridge has to be built from both sides towards the middle, not one side having to come further than the other, in order to be able to find ways to be able to help folks deal with what they're experiencing. We are all susceptible to post-traumatic stress. those who serve in the military, law enforcement, firefighters, first responders are in a higher risk group because they go where trauma is. And as Fanny said, I have two books. The second book was called Surviving the Shadows, A Journey of Hope into Post-Traumatic Stress. And the reason I called it Surviving the Shadows is because I believe we all have shadows. But in order for a shadow to exist, there needs to be light nearby. And it is our responsibility to ourselves and to each other to get to that light. And so this drove me, and about 25 years ago, the military heard about the work that I was doing with law enforcement, first responders, firefighters, and tapped me to start doing work with the military. And that brought me to going and spending time in Iraq and Afghanistan, around every United States military posting, in those in Europe, Asia, and around the world. And so this story about being undercover and becoming another person, while not one that is something that most people go through, I think that it opens a door to a conversation that many of us lead multiple lives. We have multiple stories, and understanding that you have different personalities at different stages of your life, at different locations in your life. Some folks are a certain way at home, and that's probably your most relaxed state. And it's been said that most of us have a public life, a private life, and then a secret life. And there are secrets inside of us. And how do we get those out? And so if we go to the next slide, I've taken you through this story. And one of the things that I know, in order to be able to find ways to be able to process what takes place in trauma, with trauma, is that leadership needs to take place. And I'm not talking about leadership of leading someone else, it's about leading ourselves. And one of the exercises, at least once a month, I'm with a special forces group, whether it be the SEALs, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Green Berets, any other pararescues from the Air Force. I asked them to break down these 6 C's and to think about them and reflect on them, about how each person thinks about them. But also I then put them in 2 or 3 groups of 2 or 3 folks and ask them to rank them. There's no right or wrong answer. But I think it helps us understand ourselves and values, and it creates a conversation. So competence, character, caring, communication, courage, commitment are all needed in processing trauma, and are all needed when leading others as well. And so if we go to the next slide, please. Joseph Ross, who is a granddaddy in the study of leadership, said it's an influence relationships amongst leaders and followers who attend real change that reflect their mutual purposes. When you're leading others or attempting to lead others, if no one's following, all you're doing is going for a walk. And so understanding what's the mutual purpose is extremely important. And then the next slide shares Joe LaBeouf, who is down at Duke University now, was a colonel in the United States Army, he's taught at West Point. For the English majors in the audience, I'm not going to read it for you. You read it yourselves, but what are the first words? Influencing, operating, improving. They're all action words, right? So it's about influencing, operating, and improving is how Joe is explaining it. These are conversations that I think are important when speaking about self-care, when speaking about trauma, when speaking about resiliency, and understanding those kinds of conversations. And so the next slide, Fanny, if we would, please. As Fanny made mention, the book that just went on a pre-sales launch. There's a whole new system to doing books with all the social media now. But it can be found on Heroes Are Human, Lessons in Resilience, Courage, and Wisdom from the Covert Front Lines. Is City Point Press is the publisher, Simon & Schuster, the distributor. And what drove me to this, and what drove me to want to learn more about what those who serve us are going through, is that I kept driving by hospitals a couple of years ago, and it said heroes work here. And I remember how that word made me feel. I remember how that word makes those who serve, military, law enforcement, firefighters, feel. They don't feel heroic. They don't feel like heroes. It's kind of those signs we put out front when COVID came to make everyone else feel better, that heroes are going to help solve this problem for us. And so I started doing research and spending time with doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals and first responders that were immersed in this fight against an invisible enemy. And I drew this parallels between being at war with the invisible enemy and then being at war on a foreign soil, or being battles within communities, and what it does to folks and how it impacts them. And so one of the things I do know is that getting air out of our balloons is important. Talking about sharing allows for healing. So I'm going to ask you to imagine I've got this large balloon in front of you and it's full of air. How do I get the air out? I could take a pin and pop it. We get the air out, but we don't have a balloon anymore. I let it go. It flies all over the room. It goes out the door. We don't know what happened to the balloon. But if we're patient and willing to listen to sounds we do not want to hear, it may even hurt our ears. Turn it upside down. We let a little air at a time. Makes like that awful screeching noise. But eventually we get all the air out of the balloon. We'll have a full balloon we can use again one day. That's us with trauma. But unfortunately, what do? More often than not, we push down one on top of another, and keep saying we can handle it. Those who serve like to think of themselves as being able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. They can handle it. Supermen and superwomen. Whether it was the uniform I used to wear, uniform that the military wears, or as I found out, it's even scrubs or lab coats. You start to think that you're able to compartmentalize and this stuff's not going to bother you. And please don't interpret that I'm saying that we've got to be truly honest at all positions. Those who serve have jobs to do and they are trained for it. And when the bell rings, they're going to do it. What I'm offering is saying is that when we have an environment that's in a safe environment away from the trauma, that we allow these conversations to take place. So if we go to the next slide, we need to have the conversation about resiliency. And resiliency is often thought of as individual. Resiliency comes from a group setting as well. If you're a member of a team, whether that team be in the military, law enforcement, firefighters, your family team, whatever team you're a part of, your team at work, North Shore, you're gaining resilience from those around you because we all don't have great days. And having someone pick us up is extremely important. So one of the things when I first went to Iraq, they would chop me around. I would stay at a base called up in Mosul, at a base called Camp Merez, and they would chop me around to go visit throughout the country. And one of the things they wanted me to experience was if, like a soldier was hit and injured, what takes place? So I was brought back to a field hospital, then down to Baghdad to the main hospital. And then later I went and over the years, many times visited our largest medical facility in Landstuhl, Germany, at Ramstein Air Force Base, and where our troops would be taken off the battlefields before they would be sent back to the United States. And in the first field hospital in Iraq, as we're halfway through this tour that the doctor was giving me, I said, "It's all good, doc, but who's taking care of you?" And he smiled and looked at me and he took me outside to the back of the field hospital. And there was a small patch of grass, carefully tended to, you could tell. And there were rocks that were lined up on top of it in a structure. And if you took a pitcher of water and poured it over, a babbling brook started to sound. He said, when things get too tough, we look at each other. We come out here and it's a place where we can reset. Nature in that desert was allowing those who serve to be able to reset. Resiliency and strength was found through nature. And if you go to the next slide, Fanny, when my first time to Afghanistan, you start to see all these snow-capped mountains in a beautiful, beautiful country. And one of the same things took place, and I was up at Bagram Air Force Base, and head doctor was giving me a tour. And halfway through, I said the same thing. I said, "Doc, all well and good, but who's taking care of you?" And she said, "Let's take a walk." We went up on the roof. We looked out. She said, "You see those mountains with all the snow? When things get too tough, we come up here. And we are either in Denver or Utah when we look out at those mountains. And it gives us time to reset and find resiliency to continue to do our job." Excuse me. Mind health is a word that I like to use. Because if we say mental health, it conjures up mental illness from my view. I think it's important to have words, and words matter. So I stopped doing post-traumatic stress education and awareness programs when I was going before the military and law enforcement, because I could read the body language. And it was being interpreted that they were brought there because there was something wrong with them. And so I changed it to operational stress. And I provide operational stress education and awareness presentations today. And they're like, "Yeah, we're operational, so the stress can come from operation that we're on." Words matter about how we express and have conversations. Fanny, if we go to the next slide, please. Folks, I would underline to you that self-care does not mean selfish. Self-care is about being the best you can be so that you are able to make this world a better place, so that you are able to help others. So taking time for yourself and resetting is extremely important. Please don't interpret that because I speak about this, that I've got this stuff all down pat. I struggle with all of this. But my wife, Billy, is a flight attendant. She's been with Delta for 30 plus years. So I know this brief pretty well, and I fly a lot. I have over 6 million miles myself traveling around the world. What does a flight attendant tell us? When that mask comes out of the ceiling, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to put it on ourselves first before we take care of anyone else. Understanding that self-care shows up in many ways. It's giving yourself the time to be able to allow your mind to relax, to allow reflection to take place. All too often, we put ourselves last. And it's interpreted that if I take care of me, I'm being kind of like selfish. I'll say it again. Self-care does not mean selfish. So if we go to the next slide, Fanny, I wanted to bring it to Q&A because I think when you shine a light on a subject, the conversations that are had with each other really bring us to understanding points that can be where growth can take place, where the development and growth, because while I'm sharing some thoughts, you're triggering some thoughts of your own. And if you have questions or you even have a comment that you'd like to share, I'd encourage it. And so I'll open it up for any questions or anything that may even bring us further into this conversation.
Thank you for that, Bob. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand. We'll also offer an alternative if you would like to type it in the chat, and I can read it out to Bob. But yeah, do you have any thoughts? Oh, Lori? Dr. Carlson? Sorry.
Lori's totally fine. I was just curious if there are some things you could recommend that private citizens might be able to do to try to help those returning, veterans who are suffering from effects of PTSD feel supported, or things that we could do to help.
Yeah, I would offer that we think of post-traumatic stress. Um, we all too often think of it as PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And I would offer to you, you do not get PTSD from Starbucks getting your order wrong. Yet we loosely use those terms in our society. And one of the things that I have found is that there's a tremendous amount of growth and courage and wisdom that takes place with those that have experienced post-trauma. And engaging in that side of the conversation is extremely important, because that brings out a confidence level within it, rather than we have a tendency to want to go to the negative. We live in a society that directs us that way. And we start thinking about post-traumatic stress disorder rather than post-traumatic stress growth, PTG. And I like to think of post-traumatic stress injury versus a disorder. This is an injury. Not all wounds bleed, and invisible wounds can cut and hurt as deep as the wounds we do see. This is no different than any other wound. And having people truly understand that is important. You being a vehicle for them to be able to be in a safe environment, to be able to express that, in and of itself, is an extremely important part of the process of allowing development and growth. And putting yourself in a position to even say, I don't truly understand what you experienced. I wasn't on a battlefield. But I do know that some things upset me as well. And drawing some parallels, and it goes back to whatever is personal is universal. There are no new emotions in our society. It's only how we navigate those emotions. And so the body goes through emotional upheaval based on whatever stage you're on and what your experience is. And sharing what those feelings are of anger, of disappointment, of hypervigilance, of isolation is a way to get into the conversation. Folks ask me, would you do it again? Would you go back and do that again? And I said, the answer would be, depend on when you ask me. Because if you asked me right after this had been over, I would have said, no, I'm not doing this again. But now, it's decades later. And what I've come to understand is that I had to go through this experience to be able to be in a position to be able to help a lot of good people. While the job was about arresting a lot of bad people and having them taken off the street, really the whole experience was in a bigger picture about having to go through all of this in order to be able to be in a position to help a lot of good people. So as I look back, yes, I would go through it again. And I would offer also that we become judgmental about this. And what I mean is not judgmental of me to you or you to me. We become judgmental within ourselves. We start saying it's not almost, it is a defense mechanism that goes to work, where you think about when you go through something difficult, you try to minimize it by saying someone else is going through something worse. I heard that after the shootings at Fort Hood. I heard it after, on the pile 9/11. The cops in New York would say to me, take care of the firefighters. They've gone through worse than we have. In the shootings at Fort Hood, I would hear, sir, I wasn't in the building when the shootings took place. I'm good. And what we came to realize is we had to bring folks together who went through a similar experience. Because if you're around, when we brought the people from across the post together, they all had fear that a friend or a loved one or a family member was in that building, but they were not going to voice that kind of concern to someone who was actually in the building. So we came to understand that in order to have deep conversations and comfortable conversations, safe environments, bringing people together who have gone through similar experiences was important to figure out.
Thank you for that, Bob. We have Professor LeBlanc raising his hand.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I really enjoyed it. Overlapping to that previous question, actually, I actually wanted to ask about something similar. So I am teaching for the college. I've been teaching for 10 or 15 years, but one of the things that I was thinking about is I have had students actually tell me, share that they are experiencing post-traumatic stress. I have some students that are just coming back from military service. I've had students that are perhaps recovering from addiction of some type, and so they're kind of experiencing some traumas from that. And so I was wondering if you have any thoughts as far as the, I guess the correct way to react if a student actually is kind of, or just a person generally manifesting some of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress right there in the moment. I mean, again, it kind of overlaps to the last question, but I always think to myself, what's the best way to react, like right in those first 10 seconds right there?
Yeah, calming, and in each individual, how do you create the calming environment and remove them from whatever the trigger? Because more often than not, when someone reacts in that manner, a trigger has taken place. And so understanding triggers is important, right? So it could be a date on a calendar, it could be a sound, a smell, it could be the sound of someone's voice, a particular song, whatever brings them back to the environment. And Dr. Quintel, the doc that I've done work with, and he helps us understand what triggers do to us. And one of the reasons that folks that are really suffering from post-traumatic stress really do not like to go to sleep. So they fight sleep, because when they get into that relaxed state, the mind starts replaying the event, and it's replaying the event as if it's happening. So for example, if I went to Hawaii and you and I are hanging out and I come up to you and I go, you're not going to believe Hawaii, man. It's beautiful. It's like it's a flower. I speak of it in past tense. It happened to me. Yet when you experience post-traumatic stress triggers, it's happening, and the heart rate goes up. The reason that we wake up soaking wet in our beds, the reason we wake up yelling and screaming in the nightmare, your heart rate starts to go up. You're experiencing the physiology as well as the emotional and psychological. So in what you're describing, if you can create a calming, and telling someone to calm down never works, right? It does. All right, calm down. And I'm going to yell it louder as if that's going to make it work. Helping. Be careful with touch. Some want touch and some do not. And so being real cautious about how you do it, but your voice being in a slower, lower, bring things down, extremely important. It's not going to, I've been in situations where it took us 45 minutes to an hour to be able to get someone to actually come down. And also, I think it's extremely important. In my book, Surviving the Shadows, I allowed my doctor to use my all my medical records as an example within his chapter about what the physiology of post-traumatic stress does. And very simply, his name was Guy De Silva, and he was a well-known doctor in oncology studies in New York City, had come down to Florida. At that time, I was going through some medical issues, and I was sent to him. And this guy was like Dracula, man. He took blood everywhere. I'm getting blood taken from me all over. And about 10 days later, I walk into his office, and he didn't know my background. And he said to me, Mr. Delaney, can you tell me about a period of time when there were prolonged periods of stress in your life? Because I have all the indicators here. I said, Doc, I got this book you could read, and maybe we became friends. He explained it in layman's terms to me. He said, like exposure to the sun can show up as a cancer 30 years later. Exposures to prolonged periods of stress can show up with medical issues down the road. So we often think of this as emotional and psychological. There's a physiology to it. And so when we are trying to help folks and become balanced, if we're only dealing with the emotional and psychological and not addressing the physiology is going to keep bringing us back. And those things result with maladaptive behavior, with the alcohol and drugs, sex addictions, or you can go on and on and on about the maladaptive behaviors that come as a result. So my hope is always to be able to have conversations about how can we keep post-traumatic stress at post-traumatic stress and not allow it to grow to the disorder and put up roadblocks to allow. Basketball became my therapy. I didn't know what I was going through back then. You know, people, I was hiding everything from folks. You know, if you came to my house, you would think I loved art because there was a different painting somewhere on a wall every week. I'm not the kind of guy that knows how to spackle, but I was a wall puncher. I would become frustrated like a little child, and I'd punch the wall out of anger. And then I'd run down to Walmart and buy a cheap painting and hang it over the top of it. How prophetic it was in the house is that what I was hiding from the rest of the world, because all this anger was built up inside of me, this hypervigilance, this emotional upheaval. And I didn't know what to do with it. What was I so angry about? And yet all of these feelings, while hiding them, all you do is push them down and they show up in other places. And so my drive has been that if I could help any other human being not experience what I experienced, or at least be able to alleviate some of that experience, it's important. I use a lot of analogies. I've got a bottle of water here. It doesn't weigh much, right? I mean, it's 16 ounces, half drank. It's down to about 8. I can carry it. I can hold on to it. But this is like the stuff we carry. How about I stand here for the next 30 days holding this out, and you all leave and you come back after 30 days. I'm going to be a pain in the neck to be around because this thing's going to pull on my shoulder. Even though it's not heavy, after 30 days, it's going to start to weigh on me. It's not until we learn how to put it down and walk away from it, or learn how to ask someone else to help carry it, are we going to be able to interact with it better. So hopefully that gives you some what of an answer to your question, and I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And I actually have a question that came in direct message. So Haiti Delgado asked, what is the correct way to approach a situation? Because I assume not all are open to discussing when they are going through something.
Yeah, it's going to take time. Folks are not going to just immediately go and start sharing with you. I've written 3 books. All my stuff's not on the street yet. I mean, there's still stuff in there that I got to get out too. So it's not going to just all go away overnight. And this is not 10 steps that if you do these 10 things, everything's going to be better. So often I will have military spouses say to me, please, can you just tell me, like, what are the steps that we can get to from point A to point B? And I offer that post-traumatic stress need not be a lifelong sentence, but it may be a lifelong journey of healing. But I also offer to folks that post-traumatic stress is not about what's wrong with us. It's about the wrong we experienced. So the trauma that you experience needs to be peeled back and has to be delved into and understood. And I don't pretend to be a psychologist or psychiatrist. I work with many. What I really believe is I'm a bridge builder. I'm a person that can share that I've gone through this experience, and that through help and through resources and being willing to be able to take that step. And I underline to folks that are in these kinds of situations, courage, it took me a long time to understand this. Courage is not absent of fear. Courage happens despite the fear that you're feeling. That can be on a battlefield, but that can also be in your personal life, about the fear of approaching someone, the fear of being honest about what you're doing. It took me years to be able to tell people that, you know, I was good at doing undercover work. We're all good at doing something in life. And I was wired up. I would wear a wire where you would wear a cup if you played in sports, in a jock strap. And I had on-off switches in my pockets, and I had microphones going up underneath my armpits. I did over 300 some recordings that way with mob guys. I was okay at doing that. I'd do the kiss on the cheek, hang out at the dinner, do whatever. But as soon as I got in the car and I pulled down the street 2 miles, I had to pull over and throw my guts up. Find the first gas station I could find because I had diarrhea. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and my bed was soaking wet. Now, I didn't tell anybody that back then. It took me years to be able to say very freely to you what I just said, because that would have been admitting to my own fear. And then I would think that people wouldn't think I was strong enough. All of these kinds of conversations need to be had. And by having those conversations and underlining that what is personal is universal, it allows someone else, it validates their feelings and gives them permission to have their conversation with me about their feelings.
Great, thank you, Bob. I have Professor Harris raising her hand.
Hi, thank you so much. What an honor to meet you. I remember watching you referee in the NBA, so I'm kind of fangirling out a little.
Thank you.
But I don't have a question. I really sort of have a comment of appreciation. I teach abnormal psych, and I often talk about what I call the genderization of mental illness and mental disorders, and that and I am so sorry, Lori's dog has just decided to use the water bottle as a toy. So if you hear crunching, it's Lori's dog's fault. But you know that many of our mental illnesses, the description and signs and symptoms are described in a way that is a way that women are allowed to present themselves, not men. And that for many men, I think either their distress is overlooked or minimized or not paid attention to, because the way that we diagnose it is expressed by women, or in ways that women are allowed. I hope that you can appreciate how much I appreciate you as a man being able to present this in a way that I really think men can hear. And they really need to hear it, because women who suffer from trauma, we have sort of a history of being able to talk with one another, get support, express our vulnerability. That's not as a challenge as it is for men, but the trauma is real for men as well, and they deserve the help and the compassion. And the fact that you are opening the door, and again, you're probably not even doing that on purpose, but it just, as a mental health professional, I thank you so much for doing what you're doing and presenting this in the way that you are presenting, that can be palatable to people who may not have been allowed to see vulnerability in a man and see how that can operate. So I really just wanted to thank you very much for your presentation and for what you are doing for men in our society. Thank you very much.
I appreciate your comment. And the presentations that I usually do are over 2 days. So I do like 2 hours, and then we have the afternoon just to chill, and then we go back. And so there's a whole segment that I do about how I was raised. I was raised not to cry. I was told that as a man, I couldn't cry. I couldn't. And my mom was conceived in Ireland and born here. My grandmother came over on the boat with my mom. And so I grew up Irish Catholic. And, you know, if I tell this story, is if I fell off a bicycle and my arm was all bloody and I came into the house, my mother would be like, Robert, offer up your pain for the poor souls in purgatory. And she would, for those of you that are not Catholic, there used to be a holding cell for like people in purgatory before they went to heaven and all. And then, you know, and then like years later, one of the popes, after an ecumenical council, decided there was no more purgatory. So I don't know who I was giving up all that pain for. But if my sister fell off of a swing, skinned her knee, they had a medevac chopper coming in to take her to the first plastic surgeon they could find. There was a difference in approach. And so understanding that those are holding us back, and understand that we all, in a presentation, when I'm doing deeper, I say we all understand what gender equality is. but there is a difference between the gender of man and gender of woman about how we're brought up. And we have to delve into these because these are roadblocks that are not allowing for honesty to be had. And these conversations, I appreciate you tabling that, because I think it's an important, it would be a really great conversation for you all to have. Like all this doing is shining the light on the subject. The answers will come from the folks that are sitting around this Zoom call. You will be able to delve into your own personal experiences as well as folks you know, and be able to find deeper understanding for this and help others. So I appreciate that. And I hope the dog's doing good. Is he still on the bottle?
Thank you, Professor Harris. And then next we have Professor Patia Hill. Raising your hand.
Thank you. I just had a comment. When you were talking about leaving room for people to express themselves, it just got me thinking of years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I was working at another college, and the entire class was made up of all veterans. And one thing that I learned through dealing with them was, trying to create an atmosphere of trust for them so that they ever felt they wanted to talk, they could talk. But one of the biggest things I always had to guard myself against was to make sure that I listened without judgment, because from my experience, some of the veterans that I've met are hesitant to tell their stories because they don't want to inflict that trauma on the people who are listening. So I just want to share that.
I appreciate it. And as you see behind me, there's a photograph. I don't know if you can really see it that well, but it's an iconic photograph that was taken at the tip of the spear of the Iraq War. Joe Dwyer is the soldier running with Ali Sattar, was the baby, an Iraqi baby. Joe was a medic, New York City guy. His family did not, he was telling his family he was not at the front lines. He kept telling his family he was back, he was fine, and everything else. Now, they wake up and on the front page of the USA Today, they see their son running with him. God bless Joe. 5 years after the photograph, he was dead. He committed suicide. And so many situations happen like this. He became the face of the war and was told he was a hero. Yet he knew there were 6 other soldiers running with children that day. He got all the attention. He felt guilty. It was a shame that came that I'm scared to death. I'm running with this child. And Ali Sattar is alive and well. And my hope is to be able this November to meet Ali, because I'm going back to Iraq. There's a dedication. I'm on the board of TAPS, which is Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. Bonnie Carroll, Google that name, amazing, does the work of angels. Started a program 20 years ago for the families of the fallen. However anyone passes, whether it be on the battlefield or through suicide or through natural death, to care for the families of the fallen. And we have programs every weekend, and then the national program on Memorial Day. But in November, there's going to be a dedication of a memorial honoring American and Iraqi troops who gave their lives on the battlefield. And the moms and spouses and family members of each of those will come together. And it underlines that while all wars are different, all wars are the same. We're experiencing that right now, right? There's tremendous loss, families disrupted, empty seat at the table, all those kinds of conversations that need to be had. And to have each other is going to be special, and to honor those who gave their lives. But I'm going to have an added one, because we have work being done to find Ali Sattar so that I can interview him about his feelings and share that with Joe's family. It's important to continue to delve into and honor folks that serve. We live in a society that at times authority figures, whether they're school teachers or flight attendants, are being abused. Those who serve, I'm old enough to remember after the Vietnam War how soldiers were looked upon back then. and where the respect is today. And as an aside, I'll take an exit here. We're seeing that with law enforcement today as well. And one of the things I keep hearing is there's only a few bad apples. I don't believe that. I think we've got a problem, and there's more than a few. There's a problem in the police departments, and we've got to create a different approach about how we're interacting with folks. I never understood, while at 21 years of age, I was being sent to domestic disputes to try and handle them, of 40-year-olds that were fighting on a Friday night as a husband and wife. I didn't even have a steady girlfriend. How am I going to understand the relationship? And you put people in positions to create failures. We have to become a better society. Canada does it. Canada has psychologists and psychiatrists that go with police officers. These are ways to be able to handle situations better, rather than in some situations where we allow bullies with a badge to be able to, take out their kind of anger on folks. And so we've got to become better. And we do that through change. And we do that through addressing and being honest about situations that are happening. And I'm sorry I went off on a side note there with the exit. But being from Jersey, we go down a lot of exits, right? I'm so used to that we got exits everywhere. Another question. I know we're getting close to the.
Yes, we can have one final question or comment, or just anything you want to share. Please go ahead. Any takers?
We can move right to the next, to the last. As you can tell, next week I'll be speaking in the New Jersey State Police Academy to the recruits, but also doing time with the undercover officers that they're throughout the states of New York and New Jersey. Military, law enforcement, firefighters, healthcare professionals, and now athletes. Basketball became my therapy. And what I offer to folks is, when you're going through tough times, find what gives you an inner peace. That inner peace, while I always thought of it as sports, and basketball was something that I played at the high school and college level, I started refereeing because I couldn't play anymore. And it opened a door to a whole new career. In doing the work with different groups, we started branching out, and it went into art, and it went into creative, any way that you can express yourself and allow things to take place. So I found this one soldier, Jeff Barillo's is his name, but he goes by the rap name of Soldier Hard, and he served in Iraq. And he has rap songs about post-traumatic stress. One is called Red Flags. And so when he and I are together, it's like Snoop Dogg and Frank Sinatra got together. All of a sudden, it's like we're two different, but whatever works, right? We've got to figure out where to meet people to have this conversation. We can't keep saying you got to sit on the couch and talk to somebody. That's not working. We've got to figure out, where do we meet each other? Where do we get to be able to create this environment? And so the last, I'm going to close with a story. For those that you can tell we're in a government location, this was on in November of 2013 on Veterans Day. David Robinson, who's the tall gentleman on the left side, and myself were invited. We're both NBA Cares ambassador. David played in the NBA, was a Hall of Fame basketball player, Hall of Famer in the game of life, graduate of Annapolis. And we were asked to speak with a Navy SEAL team that had just come home from deployment on the eve of Veterans Day. And then the next day we were invited to be at the wreath laying of the tomb at the Tombs of the Unknown by President Obama. And we got to have that experience. And then in the rotunda afterwards, when the president offered his thoughts on Veterans Day, and if you recall, he introduced the world to Mr. Richard Overton that day. Richard was one of the oldest living World War II veterans at that time. He was 106 years of age. And as he was speaking about Mr. Overton, David and I got eye contact, and we read each other's mind. because as soon as the president finished his words, we took off going over to meet this great American. And we moved as fast as we had since we stopped running the NBA floors. And we were there first. And David got to take some time with Mr. Overton, took some photos. And the entire time that I'm looking at Mr. Overton, I'm thinking, had I served during the time, had I lived during the time that he served, during World War II when he fought at Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal, he and I would have used different men's rooms. He and I would have drank from different water fountains. Yet he fought for me. He fought for me and my family. And when it was my turn to spend some time with him, I enthusiastically thanked him many, many times for all he has done for this country, for all of us. And I think I went too far, because at one point he grasped my hand a little tighter. He pulled me closer. And with a wink of his eye, he said, you know, I could still do more. At 106 years of age, he was saying he could still do more. Mr. Overton lived until he was 112. I keep that photograph in my office. It's a reminder to me that I can do more. I can do more to make this world a better place. I can do more to be a better husband, a better father, a better son, every title that I have. I could also do more to provide self-care so that I'm better to be able to provide for others. Mr. Overton had an impact in my life. I'm sharing it because I know others have impacted your lives. Keep them available. Keep them in your back pocket that you can pull it out for that encouragement, the resiliency, all of the things that we've spoken about that you have seen in others, because it reminds you of what's within yourself. So my hope for all of you is that you stay healthy, stay safe, take care of one another, and take care of you too. Fanny, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you to you all for being here. It's an absolute honor. And I hope to see you down the road.
Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all your time today. And, you know, as always great to learn from you. I'm going to pass it back to Professor Carlson, you know, to round off this great talk today. Thank you.
That was really great. As Dr. Jennifer Harris said, like, just talking about your emotions as a man, I think does a lot for everybody. And just thank everyone for coming. There are 2 more events if anyone's interested in them. They're both at 1 to 2:30 on Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday involves a panel of female veterans discussing their experiences, and Thursday is the story of a soldier who once was in service, decided that she wanted to transition and how that impacted her. So still got some more, and thank you all, and thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Stay safe. See you guys. Thank you.